So the next speaker is Dr. Gwyer. He helps individuals and organizations achieve greater success so they can flourish and thrive. He combines clinical, positive, and applied psychology and coaching. And he helps social entrepreneurs with Legio's life support, community, business, and organization development. And he's going to talk about a smarter life growth approach. So give a big hand for Dr. Gwyer.
Thank you all very much. I'm really pleased that you're still here because the second day on a conference is often quite a quiet time and coupled with being a Friday. So very appreciative that you're here. I was going to also thank Vicky who presented. Can you speak up? Is it on? Does that work? Oh. I was also going to thank Vicky, but she unfortunately has left. It was Vicky who reviewed all of the abstracts for all of the presentations. So all of the papers today, their papers were submitted and Vicky reviewed the abstracts and made comments and suggestions. So I was going to thank Vicky, but unfortunately she had to leave. However, we are going to Facebook Live it. So I was wondering if you could all just give Vicky a round of applause to thank her for the effort in helping Romy organise this. Oh, sorry if I dropped that. And of course to thank Romy. And is Miriam still here? Or has Miriam left as well? So my example of people leaving before the end. I first got introduced to positive psychology through Miriam. I did a positive psychology workshop that she was facilitating. And she introduced me to Vicky because we were both clinical psychologists. Romy and I got in touch about hosting an event. So we did our very first conference in London, and this is our second, and I believe the third one is being planned in... I was more interested in the location, Paris. So hopefully we'll all see you again in Paris as well. I did that very silly thing of deciding to change my presentation yesterday. Because there were so many good presentations and so many things that I wanted to talk about and so many ideas. One of the things I think about positive psychology, clinical psychology, counselling psychology, we're all very much in the same profession of trying to help people. What we actually do is very, very similar. I struggle, however, with manualized approaches and people having this idea that there's one approach. So I think we have two problems. There's no single modality that covers the plethora of human experience. And the second problem we have is people are complex wholes, not isolated parts. So my solution to that was to integrate several well-established psychological approaches, and I make no bones about this. I have stolen or stood on the shoulders of giants from the classic work of Rogers, Beck, Ellis. Beck, sorry, so I've taken the work from Ellis and Beck. What I'll do is I'll put my glasses down. No, that's fine, I'll put my glasses down. My glasses don't actually work either, that's the other thing. So I had my eyes tested, and my prescription is 2 focal lengths out. So even though I have glasses, they don't work. I can't actually see the screen, and you are a blur anyway. So I think it's a comfort holding glasses. So I'm quite happy to take from anything that works to help the people I work with get better. I also think we need a transdiagnostic approach, an approach that covers many different things. And this is the bit that I started. I was only going to add this slide in, and then I wasn't going to make any other changes. But you know, like when you do one thing, you think, oh, I'll just tweak that, and I'll just... So everything changed last night. Part of my role is a specialist clinical psychologist on an eating disorder unit. And one of the things that we did in one of the workshops, and what I do is I take photographs and then I print them out as a handout so that the week after we can carry on. And we had a list of emotions. And what I did is I asked the people to read out this, I had the list of emotions, and I asked them what emotions they felt having an eating disorder. How many of you work with people? Most of you, yeah? How many people have come to you in your professional capacity and said, I have one problem, depression, anxiety, but I don't have a problem in my relationships, with my work? Or how many people come to you and say, do you know what, I'm a bit depressed, I'm a bit anxious, I have problems at work, problems at home, and I also have gambling addiction, drug addiction, various other things. People don't have just one problem. Would you agree with that? If you look at manualised approaches, particularly say for CBT, you have the CBT approach for depression, for anxiety. But I've never met somebody who said to me, do you know what, I just have anxiety. Everyone I've worked with in 20 years has had anxiety and depression, substance misuse, OCD with something else. They have a range of problems. So, just thinking about the service users or the eating disorders unit, this is what they came up with. Let's try and point. So, empty, numb, isolated, lonely, lost, trapped, alienated, disappointed, vulnerable, exhausted, burdened, conflicted, disgusted, bullied, hopeless, useless, discouraged, miserable, desperate, afraid, relentless, distraught, powerless, overwhelmed, and defensive. That is the range of emotions they were feeling. And they managed their emotions by not eating, blocking them out, distracting, avoiding, drugs, alcohol, gambling, deliberate self-harm, sex, isolation, detaching, and exercising. So to come up with one approach that would only work with feeling distraught or feeling useless or feeling trapped clearly isn't going to work. That's supposed to be a pink elephant. So how many of you know the very famous or classic thing that most CBT practitioners do? Whatever you do, do not think of a pink elephant. Are you aware of that? So in this room, if you're not aware of it, I want no one in this room to think of a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant, possibly surrounded by dancing penguins, roller skating in a little tutu. Whatever you do, do not think of a pink elephant. What are you thinking of? Pink elephant. So what we did is we looked at what they try and do, a common approach, there's my pink elephant. So, desperate, afraid, miserable, discouraged, restless, useless, distraught, hopeless, powerless, worried, overwhelmed, distraught. I don't want to think about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push them down. And a previous presenter talked about when you try and block out one emotion, you block out emotions. Emotions aren't on a light switch where you can go, right, I'll turn off the one to the front, I'll turn on the one to the middle, I'll keep the ones at the back. If you turn off an emotion, you turn them all off. One of the things we know about eating disorders is if you stop eating and you reduce your calorie intake, your amygdala shrinks. So the part of your brain that deals with emotions shrinks. And you don't feel emotions. What sort of life do you live if you don't feel emotions? So, you feel empty, trapped, numb, lost. Just like that pink elephant, it goes bubble, 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 and it goes pop, and it explodes. So what you have here is on this right-hand column here, desperate, miserable, afraid, discouraged, restless. Here's my very badly drawn boom, and that's my explosion. Then you push it down there to feeling nothing, empty, and numb. But very occasionally, you can get a balance between emotions and logic. And that is the wise mind. So occasionally, people are in this, they feel alienated, disappointed, vulnerable, exhausted, burdened, and conflicted. It's a very hard place to be. So, what we try and do is we try and work with people to get a collaborative fit. So, I often work with people who are what we call severe and enduring presentations. So, people who have very complex presentations requiring inpatient or very intensive support. Often, psychologists or clinical psychologists have this reputation, I don't believe it, but we have a reputation for clinical psychology that what we try and do is take away or make the unpleasant better, and we ignore the positives. And that was one of Seligman's arguments about positive psychology. I don't agree with that, and I think if you look back at the early work of Rogers talked about counselling and therapy, not just taking people from being subnormal, particularly great word, but he also then talked about once you get people to feeling okay, what we should be doing as psychologists is taking them to supra-normal, so getting them to reach their potential. So this idea of clinical psychology, counselling psychology, and positive psychology, in my opinion, is a bit of a false dichotomy. So what we do is we get the fit between you and your difficulty, the skills that make sense to you, and we apply a top-down, bottom-up approach. So what this looks like, all of us have got past experiences. Those past experiences influence how we interpret the here and now. They also interpret how we make predictions about the future. That then often leads us to feeling emotions. Those emotions drive us to action, have thoughts, body sensations, and that often spins around. So, at the bottom we have the area of intervention, the part moves from the foreground and is the focus of current attention. So what Fritz Perls talks about in his Gestalt therapy is that we are a figure and ground. So all of these parts of me, as Pat, father, partner, clinical psychologist, positive psychologist, anxious, neurotic, all of these things I've got, sometimes one part of it comes to the foreground and is more important, and it goes back. So yesterday we had a talk about the synchronicity between the service user or the coach and the coachee. This idea that actually there's a bit of a dance between your client and you as an individual, and your job as a therapist or a coach is to be able to follow that dance, and what the person brings up is what's focused on. It then goes back into the foreground, sorry, goes back into the background, and then something else comes up into the foreground. Does that make sense? Okay, so how many of you have heard this thing where you see somebody, hopefully, I know you do this, but we all do it at times. There's somebody who may be drunk. There may be somebody who's homeless. And you'll hear somebody say, it's their choice. You ever heard that? Okay, so it's a very easy way of dismissing people. How many of you can remember being back at school? Okay, did anyone in your class say, do you know what I want to be when I grow up? I want to have depression. I want to have anxiety. I want to have an eating disorder. I want to have PTSD. I'd like to be homeless. I'd like a gambling addiction. I do not believe human beings make that choice. And I will not ever believe that human beings make that choice. I believe that they do those things because they have what we call a Hobson's choice. So this might be a bit of a cultural thing. Anyone who know what a Hobson's, do you know what a Hobson's choice is? So, in England in the 17th, 16th century, when we had coach and horses, there's a famous innkeeper, and when you went to get a new horse, he would say, you can have any horse you like, as long as it's the one by the door. A bit like Henry Ford, you can have any car you want as long as it's black. People do not have a choice. So part of my job as a psychologist is to empower people to have a choice so they can choose. Any of you heard of Viktor Frankl? Most people have heard of Viktor Frankl, so quite happy to steal from him as well. The last of our human freedoms, to choose one attitude and given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way, and there are always choices to make. So I believe that people have mental health difficulties because they do not have choice, or they do not believe they have choice. My job is to help empower them to give them choice. How many of you work with people? Quite a few of you? I have a kind of a gut feeling that most of the people I work with know what they need to do. What they don't know how to do is how to do it. Make sense? Would you agree with that? My job is to help people work out how to do it and how to make a healthy choice. We also have something in the UK called capacity. So one of the things in mental health, people also have the right to do things which are unhelpful and we may not agree with. As long as they have capacity, They have that right to choose. So my job isn't to say what's good, what's bad, what's positive, what's negative, what's right or wrong. My choices are to empower you to make a decision that is right for you. Make sense? Okay, so what we hopefully do is empower. So encourage people that change is within their autonomy. Make change as easy as possible. Facilitate change, and of course provide the skills to enable change to happen. Our actions and reactions are a conduit between our internal and external world. So the only way you know what I'm feeling, apart from if I tell you, is by the actions and the things I do. My internal world is mine. Unless I choose to share it with you, the only way you can work it out is through my actions. So hopefully, we talk about Maria roaring, or Maria roars to brim with serenity. So I think when people have mindful awareness, reflection and insight, they have understanding. But just having understanding and insight doesn't produce change unless you do what? Act. And if you're an emotional mind and you have no awareness, no reflection, no insight, you act in an unwise way. How many of you know people, or yourself, I'll include myself, who have done things which at the time seemed very sensible, seemed very logical, and the next day you have said, kind of wish I hadn't done that, it wasn't the most sensible thing. So all of us do actions without awareness, insight, and can be quite unhelpful. We then need to take responsibility for our actions. We need to have optimism, we need to be adaptable, and we have to have self-respect. And by that I mean respect for ourselves and respect for others, and focus on our strength. And that's how we walk. To breathe, we need to be aware of breathing techniques. So a very simple one, a short breath in, and a longer, slower breath out. We need to be aware of relaxation techniques. We need to be aware of imagery techniques and guided imagery, and we need to be aware of mindfulness. We also need to self-soothe, so to be able to soothe and calm our mind and our body. That is how we brim with serenity. We need acceptance. Sometimes I can be the most skilled person in the world, and I need to accept I will not always get my way. The world can be unfair, the world can be cruel, the world can be unkind, and sometimes I need to accept that. I also never need to give up on myself, and sometimes distracting. Sometimes having who here have a duvet day? Do you know what a duvet day is? Duvet day is when you decide, you know what, I'm not unwell, I'm not happy, I just want to spend the day under a duvet watching crappy films and eating chocolate. That's a duvet day. But we all have those days. Sometimes the world is a bit too much and we just want to push it away for a while, and that's okay. You need to invest in yourself. What do you reckon the biggest return on investment you'll ever get will be? Investment you make in yourself. Sorry? Going to the gym. As long as you're investing in yourself, that's going to be the biggest investment you get. If you don't invest in yourself, and if you don't believe in yourself, why should other people? So invest in yourself. You are worth it. Find meaning, follow passions. So one of the things we've talked about is following passions. Have you ever heard of follow your bliss and follow your blisters? So it's a very big thing in the States about following your bliss, and people thought that just means I can do everything I enjoy. And the bloke who, I want to say Turnbull, but I'm not sure. I've forgotten his name. And he kind of says, with hindsight, he wished he had said, follow your blisters. How many of you have worked for something and achieved it? How many of you have got something quite easily and it was like, yeah. What means more to you, the stuff that you worked for or the stuff that just fell in your lap? When we work for something, when we get blisters, we have a sense of meaning, purpose and achievement. We need to be resilient. Sometimes we get knocked over, so we need to get back up. We need to be open to experiences and actively engage. So that's how we improve. We also need to have a realistic, achievable, ideal self. My example of that is, I would like to be a ballet dancer. What do you reckon the possibility of a 50-year-old male who hasn't done any exercise, possibly in about 20 years, ashamed to admit it, have put on 2 stone in the last couple of months, even more ashamed to admit that. I've never done a day's exercise ballet-wise in my life. Is it realistic for me to be a ballet dancer at this stage of my life? Thank you for being so optimistic. It's not really realistic, achievable, or ideal. So if I place my best ideal self on something which isn't possible, that doesn't mean I can't do it. That means I do it as a hobby, as I do it as a pleasure. But to give up everything and try to do it as a profession is not going to be helpful. The other thing we do is we march to the beat of our own drums. We regulate our body sensations. We are in tune to our emotions. We are aware of our actions, we're aware of our thoughts, and we're aware of our social connections. Stolen from business, smarter goals, I added in evaluated and reflected upon. Life, make sure you do things that you love, the things that interest you. Remember to be fair, kind, and compassionate to yourself and others. There you go. And include the things that you enjoy. I start with growth, I think that's Whitmore, and I add in tactics and habits. So, I often say to clients, hopefully rather tongue-in-cheek, that I'm a very good therapist, and I'm really good at what I do, but I'm really rubbish if you're dead. So my priority is always going to be keeping somebody safe and alive. Once they're safe and alive, we're going to look to stabilisation. And once we get to stabilisation, we're going to go to growth. But as soon as somebody drops back into that area there of safety and risk, that's what we're going to focus on. So, lots of handouts. So this is my favourite one at the moment. Are you aware of the Holt vulnerabilities? So, used a lot in alcohol and drug work. When you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, you're more vulnerable to your emotions. Touch paper. So let's imagine I'm hungry and I'm tired. That causes the touch paper to get lit, the gunpowder explodes, and I have a choice. Emotional over-control, wise mind response, or emotional mind out of control. So it's about empowering people to be aware they have a choice. I can block my emotions out and feel numb. I can be overwhelmed by emotions, or I can get in control of my emotions, and I can be aware of my responses, and I can respond instead of react. What it looks like when you do this with people is stuff, baggage. So low mood, diet, drugs, alcohol, PTSD, loss of hope, meltdown, going down to their thoughts. You can see there, vomiting was a way of controlling their behaviour. So then what we do is we tidy them up. So that previous one there was tidied up. So that was tidied up to that. Now somebody can make sense of it, and once you can make sense of it and you can predict it, you can control it. When you can control it, you have choice. Oh. That's it.